But I refuse to hold some trolls on the internet or some, influencers or fringe people, whomever they are.
Well, it was elected officials, members of Congress, very important.
I will not hold them to the same bar that I hold the President of the United States.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Bran Cooper, and in this clip from CNN's Abby Phillip show, you're about to hear Anna Navarro argue that elected officials shouldn't be held to the same standard as the president. Pay attention to that distinction because it's the core of what's being debated here. What's being suggested is that lawmakers somehow carry less responsibility for their words than Donald Trump does. But members of Congress aren't internet trolls. They're elected officials with real power and real influence. If rhetoric matters, then it matters when it comes from them too. You can't excuse one group while demanding absolute restraint from another without exposing a double standard. That's why this moment stands out. Viewers don't hear consistency here. They hear selective accountability, and once that's clear, the argument starts to lose credibility. Let's get back into the video.
Passion, empathy, the moral high ground, all have fallen victim to Donald Trump's presidencies. But tonight, we're seeing a new low after the deaths of Hollywood icon Rob Reiner and his wife, producer Michelle Singer Reiner. The couple's son, Nick, is now in police custody, booked on suspicion of murder. Nick has spoken publicly about struggling with addiction, going to rehab, and experiencing homelessness. Tonight, as tributes and condolences continue to pour in for the Reiners, Trump used this moment to mock Reiner's death, saying he had Trump derangement syndrome. And when asked about his comments today, the president doubled down.
I wasn't a fan of his at all. He was a deranged person as far as Trump is concerned. He became like a deranged person, Trump derangement syndrome. So I was not a fan of Rob Reiner at all in any way, shape, or form.
It's not just Democrats, but some conservatives are criticizing Trump's response. Evangelical Russell Moore called the comment vile and disgusting. Marjorie Taylor Greene called the deaths a family tragedy and said it's not about politics. And here's what Senator John Kennedy said Trump should have done instead.
A wise man once said nothing. Why? Because he's a wise man. I think President Trump should have said nothing.
All right. We've got a great group that are here. Let's start with you. When it comes to that comment you just heard there, a wise man says nothing. It's that old adage, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Is that what should have happened with President Trump?
I was 9, 10, 11 years old where my grandfather, of whom I'm named after, Artie Idala, taught me that lesson. I think I was being critical about someone or something, and he was like, hey, Artie, you know what? If you don't have anything nice to say, just don't say anything at all. And I believe that's what the president did when the vice president, Dick Cheney, died. I think he didn't really acknowledge it whatsoever. And I think that would have been the wise choice here. And even if he did, if he couldn't help himself but say something critical, you have to say, look, I never liked Rob Reiner. We never got along. He was so overly critical of me. But what happened to him and his family was so horrific and so tragic that the nation should pray for them.
Scott, why doesn't the president rise to the occasion? When it comes to these sorts of things, we see kind of over and over again, his responses are often less than humane.
Well, I agree with Arthur. I think he should have said nothing. Look, I'm not surprised that Donald Trump didn't have anything nice to say about Mr. Reiner. Reiner was one of his most vocal critics and did for, basically a decade, say he should be in prison, called him a fascist, et cetera, et cetera. But the correct answer here, and the advice I would have given him, is just put it in your pocket. You're allowed to harbor opinions and feelings about people, but in this particular case, someone was tragically murdered. Look, we just, as conservatives, we just rolled out of one of the most horrific things that have happened to our movement, which is the murder of Charlie Kirk. And I have been very critical of everybody who celebrated that murder, the thousands and thousands of liberals who've celebrated that. They shouldn't have done that either. And so, in this particular case, putting it in your pocket would have been the right.
And the thing is, Rob Reiner did not celebrate Charlie's murder.
Yeah.
He condemned it very vocally. So yes, on one hand, he's done more than just criticize Donald Trump. He's raised millions and millions and millions of dollars to make sure Trump didn't become president. However, when Charlie was executed, Rob Reiner came out forcefully and said, I don't care what anyone's politics is, this should
and I would suggest that the office of President of the United States comes with a higher bar. and a certain duty. And if he can't exercise the duty, then just shut up, keep your mouth shut, and keep Rob Reiner's name out of your mouth, particularly today. Look, what happened to that family is really an unspeakable tragedy. It's so hard for me to wrap my arms around. And there are millions of American families who are dealing with children with mental illness and drug addiction. And as a family, my own family, that has suffered from the consequences of drug addiction, I can tell you that the biggest fear of any parent, and they can be very good parents who don't give up on their child and who love that child, but can't save the child no matter how many times you send them to rehab, no matter how many times you send them, no matter what pills you're on, no matter sometimes you just can't reach a kid. And the biggest terror of one of those parents is that that child will hurt themselves or hurt somebody else, much less somebody in the family. So what is happening to this American family is tragic. And for Donald Trump to use the occasion, not to rise to the occasion, but to lower himself to a level that I can't even imagine and attack Rob Reiner and say his death was caused by his criticism of Trump is disgusting and condemnable and unacceptable. And I am glad that both of you are saying that it was the wrong thing to do, because we cannot normalize this level of cruelty and stupidity.
This is where the discussion starts to drift, and it happens the moment Charlie Kirk is brought into it. Because bringing up a different tragedy doesn't actually address what's being discussed here. The issue on the table is Donald Trump's response to the Reiner family tragedy, and whether a president should exercise restraint in moments like this. Once the conversation shifts to unrelated events, it stops being about accountability and starts becoming about deflection. What makes that pivot especially weak is that Rob Reiner did not praise or excuse violence in any comparable situation. By all accounts, he publicly condemned it. So invoking Charlie Kirk here doesn't add clarity or fairness, it muddies the waters. These are separate circumstances, involving different people, different responses, and different contexts. Treating them as interchangeable only avoids engaging with what was actually said in this moment. And the expectation being discussed here is not unreasonable or partisan. No one is asking the president to offer praise, agreement, or reconciliation. The expectation is restraint. Silence, if necessary. That's not a political demand. That's a basic standard that comes with the office. When tragedy strikes a family, especially one involving mental illness or addiction, most Americans instinctively understand that it's a moment for seriousness, not personal commentary. The problem with whataboutism is that it turns moral judgment into a comparison game instead of a standard. It suggests that unless every wrong is addressed simultaneously, none of them matter. But that's not how accountability works. You can condemn one response without relitigating every past grievance. You can say something was inappropriate without qualifying it through unrelated events. And viewers recognize that instinctively. They can tell when the conversation is being redirected away from the issue at hand. Instead of confronting what was said and whether it met the moment, the discussion gets pulled sideways. That doesn't persuade anyone. It just reinforces the sense that certain behavior is always going to be explained away rather than honestly evaluated. And that's where the disconnect really settles in. When a moment calls for clarity, the conversation instead dissolves into comparison, and comparison becomes a substitute for judgment. Instead of asking whether the president's words match the gravity of the situation, the focus shifts to whether someone else, at some other time, behaved badly too. That shift might feel strategic in a debate, but to viewers at home it reads as avoidance. What people are responding to isn't partisanship, it's tone and timing. Most Americans understand that political rivalries exist, and that strong opinions don't disappear in moments of crisis. But they also understand that leadership sometimes means knowing when not to speak. When that expectation is treated as unreasonable or partisan, it creates the impression that there are no shared standards left, only loyalties. And once the discussion reaches that point, the substance gets lost. The tragedy itself fades into the background, replaced by point scoring and defensive maneuvers. That's why these exchanges feel unsatisfying. They don't resolve anything. They don't clarify values. They just reinforce the sense that the conversation is more about protecting a side than confronting a moment honestly. At some point, audiences stop listening for arguments and start listening for sincerity. They want to know whether anyone is willing to say, plainly and without conditions, that some moments require restraint. When that answer keeps getting complicated, it doesn't strengthen the defense, it weakens it.
By Donald Trump.
But it is normalized, and I think that
No, it's not, Bakari.
maybe that is my youthful naivete, or maybe that is my pessimism that Donald Trump has bestowed upon this country, but He's never risen to the level of the office when we have this moment. He's never been there when the country needed him to bridge a gap or divide. I recall during the Mother Emanuel shooting when Barack Obama sang Amazing Grace, how the country was just for even just the pendency of that song was able to just talk about that issue of race and come together in a tone and tenor that hadn't been done before. I remember George W. Bush after 9/11. I mean, those type of tragic events, he was there. I mean, you remember the ball game, those type of things. Donald Trump doesn't have that capability.
He tried at the Charlie Kirk Memorial when he hugged his wife and he made some statements.
Respectfully, though.
He
tried.
He tried.
Do you remember the Charlie Kirk Memorial?
This is where the record needs to be set straight. Saying Donald Trump tried at the Charlie Kirk Memorial isn't really accurate. Simply being present isn't the same as meeting the moment. What mattered there was tone and focus, and instead of centering unity or the family's loss, the message drifted back toward personal grievances. That doesn't signal healing. It signals a refusal to adjust to the gravity of the situation. And that's why the comparisons being made here don't fully hold up. When people reference moments like Obama after Mother Emanuel or Bush after 9/11, they're talking about presidents who understood when to step outside themselves and let the moment lead. The criticism here isn't about attendance. It's about whether the response matched what the country needed in that moment. So this isn't about showing up. It's about whether a leader can recognize when restraint, humility, or silence is the more appropriate response.
He said he disagreed with forgiving.
Yes.
I will tell you this.
Enemies.
The bar for Donald Trump is in hell, right? That's where our expectations are for him. And for somebody to simply say that the president of the United States, when somebody dies in the fashion that they did, should just be quiet, we need to all look at ourselves and say that is the standard that we hold for the president of the United States? That this man that is 80 years old is incapable of actually having empathy? This man who's 80 years old is incapable of being an example for our children, regardless of Democrat or Republican. And the bigger condemnation I have is for those individuals who call themselves evangelical Christians who surround the president of the United States, but then look at this type of nonsense and turn a blind eye to it. He has a prayer council. They lay hands on him with what? Gloves? Mittens? I mean, that ain't getting through. I mean, who are they praying to? And so I have a great deal of disdain for, and listen, there are people who will say, I love Donald Trump's policies. I hate the man that he is. That is just a very, very weird paradigm that I'm not sure I could find myself in.
I've two issues with this statement today, right? Certainly silence would have been vastly preferable to this. But number one is just the sheer and utter soullessness of this statement. How long was it between the actual murder and the statement? 7 hours? 6 hours? I mean, not even a moment of breath and grace. But number two, as Anna referred to, the statement spreads misinformation. It suggests that the cause of the murder was something about politics or Rob Reiner's view of Donald Trump. That is dangerous. We see how quickly the tiniest little flicker can cause conspiracy theories and inaccurate information to take off. It's irresponsible of him to do that. And I'm actually surprised. It could have been an opportunity for Donald Trump to say, look what narcotics do to families. This is one of his number one issues. It's why he's doing what he's doing with Venezuelan boats, right? And he could have said, you see what these drugs do to these families? It's horrible. My blessings, my prayers are with them.
It was definitely a missed opportunity on the level and I didn't think about your level, but on the level of what Anna is saying, he could have risen to the occasion and just said, putting all the politics aside, this was an absolute American tragedy. I have sons. It's unimaginable, and let's all say a prayer and hug each other, hold each other's hands at the prayer council.
Think of this family today. I mean, think about a daughter who walked into that house and found her parents.
And he's got another son as well.
I just, given what we just lived through with Charlie, I mean, every conservative that
Shut up about Charlie. Jesus Christ.
I know is still very much processing this. And
I'm going to stop you there because I want to play some of the reaction to when Charlie Kirk was killed. Here's sort of just a smattering of what was said mostly from Republicans.
Over the last 11 days, we have heard stories of commentators, influencers, and others in our society who greeted his assassination with sick approval, excuses, or even jubilation.
The man wasn't even buried yet, and Democrat members of Congress were denigrating his memory. Many Democrats in elective office have now been totally captured by a radical fringe of the far left base who want to dehumanize every person they disagree with. We must continue to call this wickedness out.
Some of the very same people who spent the last 8 years trying to sit in moral judgment of anyone who disagreed with them about politics suddenly started cheering for murder.
The hypocrisy that you hear there, right? You hear them talking about the left doing this. And then the statement, how do you square those two things?
I don't. I disagree with the statement. I wish he hadn't made it. And as I mentioned, what happened after Charlie died? Lots of people were quick to celebrate the death, call him racist, call him Nazi, attribute statements to him that he never made, et cetera, et cetera. And those of us on the right who knew Charlie and loved Charlie, were quick to call that out and say, this is misinformation. This is a heinous way to treat someone who left behind a grieving widow and little children. So I don't square it. Because
to be fair, I do want to just
we're still processing that.
Yeah.
And if we want to expect other people to live up to a standard that they didn't live up to after Charlie, we should.
But Scott, this is more than just other people. Listen, I agree with you. Anybody who celebrated after Trump got shot, shame on them. Anybody who celebrated after Charlie Kirk got murdered, shame on them. But I refuse to hold some trolls on the internet or some, influencers or fringe people, whomever they are.
Well, it was elected officials, members of Congress, very important.
I will not hold them to the same bar that I hold the President of the United States. I think, he's got the biggest bully pulpit. And as anybody who's ever been attacked by Donald Trump knows, once he attacks, it gives permission to so many others that hang on his every word to do the same thing. And it hurts my heart to think about Romy Reiner and Jake Reiner, the siblings, the siblings who are the victims also of this crime, and what's going to befall them from social media because of what Trump just did. It's just irresponsible and horrible.
The fascinating part about this conversation, though, is that if Trump is one thing, he is consistent. And I've always told people that Trump has, I've always referred to Trump as one of the most honest brokers we have in politics. He told us exactly what he was going to do when he was running for president. He's executing on those plans. But even when he came down the escalator in 2025, we had
2015.
Excuse me, 2015. I'm in a time warp. 2015. The essence of one. I think the quote is, "Character is who you are when no one's watching." Right. The essence of Donald Trump's character has never been in question. People who worked with him, people who contracted with him, people who rented from him, people who knew him from back in New York, people who he denigrated Ted Cruz's wife. He called her ugly, right? Like, he created nicknames for people on the stage, and he was running for president of the United States. That what we have done in this country, Democrats, Republicans, and even more importantly, the mainstream media, I hope people hear that, even more importantly, the mainstream media, is we have created a bottomless pit of character for the people that we elect to high office in this.
Oh boy, this was a lot to process. This is exactly where the contradiction becomes impossible to ignore. You can't spend minutes talking about standards and then immediately argue that those standards shouldn't apply to elected officials or members of Congress. That logic doesn't hold. If anything, people with official power and public platforms should be held to higher expectations, not lower ones. You can't dismiss harmful rhetoric by labeling it as coming from trolls or fringe voices, when the discussion itself makes clear these were statements coming from people in office. And this is where the whataboutism keeps creeping in. The moment Charlie Kirk is brought into this, the focus drifts away from what Donald Trump actually said in this specific situation. These are not interchangeable moments. You can condemn cruel reactions in one case and still address irresponsible rhetoric in another. Holding people accountable doesn't require turning every conversation into a comparison exercise. It requires dealing honestly with what happened right in front of you. What's also striking here is the argument that Trump's behavior is acceptable because it's consistent. Consistency alone is not a defense. Repeating the same behavior over and over doesn't transform it into leadership. If anything, it reinforces the concern being raised, that there is no adjustment for gravity, no recognition that certain moments require restraint. Leadership isn't just about being predictable. It's about knowing when the moment demands something different. And this idea that the bar should be lower because Trump has always been this way is part of the broader problem. Over time, repeated justifications, explanations, and deflections have shifted expectations downward. Things that would once have been universally criticized are now treated as normal debate points. That normalization didn't happen overnight. It happened because political parties, media figures, and pundits kept explaining behavior away instead of clearly saying, this isn't appropriate. That's why the frustration you hear from Anna Navarro and Bari Weiss resonates with so many people. They're not arguing partisan loyalty. They're arguing that character still matters, tone still matters, and moments of national tragedy shouldn't be turned into grievance-driven talking points. When that expectation is treated as unreasonable, it says more about how far the conversation has drifted than about the people raising the concern. At some point, what viewers want is simple clarity, not comparisons, not deflections, not explanations wrapped in what about arguments. Just a willingness to say that certain moments call for restraint and that failing to meet that moment deserves honest criticism, no matter who is involved. I want to hear what you think about this. Do you believe holding leaders to a consistent standard still matters? Or do you think moments like this are being overanalyzed? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read them all and the discussion matters here. And if you appreciate this kind of honest breakdown, make sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.